I just want to say good morning to everybody online and to everybody in the room. Thank you for coming and spending your Friday morning with me. Today I'm going to talk about the assessment exemptions and the agricultural program because all of that has gotten a lot of attention recently, especially because of the county council changes. But before we start, I did want to put in a plug. I was talking to people in the room about it, that there is a tax board of review group, and it is a group that hears all appeals. And these are appeals when it's about an assessment, whether they feel we're too high or low. Usually people don't complain when we're too low, but we have had 2 appeals in the past. Usually it's people that are going to list their property, so they want the value up as high as possible. But the other times it's been because the county is too high, or it's an exemption that we haven't granted them, or we removed an exemption and it was incorrect, or they feel that we shouldn't have. So those are the 2 biggest reasons for appeal. There are other items on there when it comes to inequity and fair and equitable treatment and how we assess, and then if they feel something is completely illegal. And so right now we have 4 board members, and we do need a 5th board member. Quorum for our tax board of review is 3 people. And if you only have 3 people there and 1 has to recuse themselves, then we don't need quorum. If you have 4 and 1 is sick, then all 3 people that are there to meet the votes needs to all vote unanimously on something. And somebody asked if we have security at our hearings. We typically do not have security. It can get contentious. It's one of the hardest boards in the county to fill because it's not the fun and frilly liquor commission. Everybody wants to be on liquor commission. Or somebody has an issue at police, so they go on the police commission. The tax board of review, if you're a realtor into construction, have law background, this is a really good area for you. It's a great board. It does a lot of public service. Of course, it's not paid. None of our boards and commissions are paid. All you get is a free lunch and mileage, which, isn't much of an incentive because it depends on how many appeals we have. So this year, our number of appeals is pretty low. And so there's probably going to be about 4 to 6 hearings. And they run 2 days in a row, back to back in Hilo and Kona. So the one board does cover the whole island. And we only meet for a couple months out of the year, and then there's other months that has training. But if you're interested, please go to our county mayor's website. That's where you would fill out the form for interest. We have nothing to do with who gets onto the boards or who even gets reviewed. It's all handled through the mayor's office. And then county council confirms you. All right. So discussion topics, real property tax assessment process. I'm going to go through this one really quick since most of you know about market values. I don't have to explain that. Exemptions, deadlines, and the agricultural program and changes, which is the hearing that was last night. So market value, it's a defined for property tax purposes. I'm also a licensed fee appraiser, but I can't practice fee appraisal while I work for the real property tax office. So it's been about 14 years now since I haven't done a fee appraisal. But I do maintain my license only for the fact that we go to state court, tax appeal court, and they prefer to have a licensed appraiser on staff. The mass appraisal process, that's what we have to utilize at the county. And that's where we take a lot of sales, or whatever sales we actually have, that is similar to the property, and we have to apply it across the board. So we will get a lot of questions like, how come you don't know that my property is worth just this much? And we don't get to spend a lot of time on each property. And this is the reason why. We have, let's see, right now I think we have 14 appraisers. Only 12 of the positions are filled. We've been trying to, as soon as we get one, somebody leaves and goes somewhere else or it's much more challenging in West Hawaii to keep our positions filled in all of the county. Competing with construction and hotel has just been really hard. We can't match the pay. So as a mass appraiser, each county appraiser is tasked with appraising about 10,000 parcels a year. They have to set the land values, they have to review all sales for their area that they're assigned to, and come up with the value as of January 1st. For fee appraisers, and I know some can do a lot more now than I could, but when I was doing it, I was doing about 5 a week. I could get a little bit more out if I was doing the same condo or in a subdivision that had similar properties. But that's about the average I had, and so if I had worked 38 years, I wouldn't hit 10,000 appraisals. And it's a lot, and I know the computer technology has changed in 14 years, and so they can get a lot more, but it's still not quite to 10,000 a year. The sales data, so a big question we get asked a lot, especially when we go to our appeal hearings, is what sales data do you use? And so we have to use arm's length transactions, include verification with documents. They need to be recorded at the Bureau of Conveyances. So if it's an agreement, a sale, and it's not recorded and it's off the record, there's no realtors involved, it's not been listed on an open market, we can't use that sale. So those sales are thrown out. We're supposed to verify every sale either with a CTC, a conveyance tax certificate. So if we're seeing an ETC, then something already tells us, well, we gotta dig more into that because that might not be an open-ended sale that we can use. The MLS records is really huge. We do subscribe to HIS, and we have discussions with sellers, buyers, or realtors. And I think from fee appraisal days, I don't have the hesitation to call realtors just to be like, hey, is there anything funky about this sale? It looks really high, and if it sold that high and they all loved it, great. But was something else included that maybe wasn't noted on the CTC? Or was somebody in distress? Anything so that we know if we should be using that as a good market sale to set all the values. This is really important when you're in some areas that don't have a lot of sales, and that usually is our commercial and industrial. We have very limited sales on this island to set about 3,000 parcels. I think last year we had only 17 sales that were verified. In the past, we have used from time to time REOs. Right now, we are not. And the reason for that is in order for us to really give REOs and foreclosures part of that mass universal input, it needs to be more than 20% of the market. And so in 2022, 2023, and even currently what we're seeing for 2024, it's not making up 20% of the market yet. I know I keep hearing, oh, it's coming, the banks have a bunch, it's coming. I've been hearing that for quite a bit of years, and we keep watching for it because that's a big telltale. Right now, what we're seeing is in the high end, there's been a little bit of sales that have, I would say, softened. But I think the caution I always tell our staff too is when you're looking at MLS records from last year or even a specific point in time to another point in time, they may look like the numbers are going down, and definitely the number of sales went down. But when it's showing that the market's decreasing, I always tell the staff, look for paired sales. It has to be the same property that's resold. That'll give you your best indicator about your market, because you're not always comparing the same condos to the ones now. If last year a bunch of 3,000 square foot properties sold and they were at a higher value, but now you're selling 1,500 square foot as your average, it's going to look like your market dropped, but your property's changed. And so that's something that sometimes when the public is looking or reviewing certain MLS data, they're not looking at. They're like, oh my gosh, MLS told me it dropped 20%. I'm like, well, we're having a hard time finding that in the actual market. But if you do hear of it starting to tank, let me know. We haven't seen it yet. All right, oh, I did miss one important part. We do pick up unpermitted structures for value, and this is different than some of the other counties. And this has been highly debated through the years, and part of it comes from building division feeling like you shouldn't tax for them because they're not legal. And I get where they're coming from. I'm not, I do. However, a lot of people are building unpermitted. They're selling unpermitted. They are renting unpermitted. And it's not our call to say, because you're unpermitted, you're worth nothing, or that you shouldn't get it. People apply for home exemptions on unpermitted properties. And so here, if it's unpermitted, even if it's a lanai that has a tent on it, if that's your home and that's where you're living, we will give you the home exemption. It doesn't have to be a permitted dwelling.
Has that always been?
Yes, it's always been like that since I've been here and prior, as far as I knew when it came over. Now in 1979 to the early 80s, that may not have been, but we've been picking up, if it adds value, we pick it up. And and I don't wanna pick on any area on the island, but if you don't allow for unpermitted, then a lot of places in Puna and Ka'u wouldn't qualify for the homeowner exemption. And I think the county has to weigh out, what's the goal? Is it to support people having a home, or is it to make sure everybody gets a permit? And I know depending on who you ask at county, it'll be different, and even every council member. But for our purposes, we pick it up and we recognize whatever you call your home as your home. It may not be in our record as a dwelling, but it will put it in our records. So here's another one, market value. I bought the property for 1.2 in 2022, and now it's 2024, and you guys are assessing me at 1.4. And people will get very mad, and especially if they've come from California, if they're in a place where what you bought is what your value solves, where it's stuck at or where it's frozen at. That is true for there, that is not true for here. We have to reassess and come up with a value for what your property could sell for on January 1st of every year. I will say on the average, we're usually a little lower. There has been times that we have been a little higher, and that's when you'll see the appeals. And this year our appeals numbers are about a little over 400. It's relatively low. A couple years ago when the market was going crazy, but parts in the mainland were already starting to stabilize, we had over, I think, 1,100 appeals. That was one of our higher years. What does the county use to value properties? And this is important to understand. While we're using a market approach, it is still somewhat of a hybrid. So your land value totally at market, right? There's no other way to look at it. When it comes to your improvements, we do calculate based on what the size of your improvements are, your age, so we're looking at depreciation, what other items you have on your property, but we calibrate it to the market, so it's not a strict cost approach that you'll see on a fee appraisal. And I know a lot of fee appraisers don't even have to do the cost approach in a lot of appraisals anymore, but it is calibrated to the market. So here's an example of where you can go. If you go to our website and you click search records, if you look at, this is the data that the real property tax has, and if you're looking at it for maybe a property you're going to list, you can go to the site and see, if we have it way off. Here we have it built in 1972, effective is 1982. If you know the condition and quality of the house, it was never fixed up, and it looks like a 1960, that's something you want the owner to bring to our attention, because then that means we're basing the value that it's more of a 1982 house, not even 1972. And things can change quick. You just have one owner that decided to stop taking care of it, tons of deferred maintenance. It can go backwards real quick, especially if properties sit vacant. I would look at the sizes, so it shows you usually sketches, not on every parcel is there going to be a sketch, and it tells you what the area is. If it's a carport, we have a porch with an unsealed railing, we have one with a railing, most times that's a lanai area. If you know that the owner has removed parts of that, that's when the owner should let us know so that we can reassess it so it can come down. Again, most people don't tell us when we're too low, they usually tell us when we're too high. But these are some of the things, if you see us way out there, it's tied to this screen. That grade on that bottom, right above the picture, it says 3. We do have our grading on the website, but a grade 4 is your average house. Grade 3 is going to be your HPM kit homes, the old Trojan, Huntsdorfs. I would definitely take a look at the grade. The grade can make a big difference. So your grade is your quality. So I would say majority of our homes, the new homes here, are going to be at a 4 or 5. You will never see a 9 typically in Kona unless it's at Kukio. That's a custom, elaborate home. And most times we can never even hit the cost on those because it's off the charts for us. We do use Marshall & Swift, so if you're used to that or you're used to working with a realtor or insurance companies, we utilize Marshall & Swift costing programs. All right, our exemptions. So a lot of places that people move from don't have the same exemptions that we have at the whole county of Hawaii. They don't have to apply for a homeowner's exemption because it's just given to them if it's their first home. It is not like that in any of the counties in Hawaii. You actually have to apply for it. So I think that's the biggest thing to remember or help them understand. Even if they live here, sometimes they've had their house for 30 years. They applied so long ago, they can't remember, but they need to apply when they move to a new place. It doesn't just follow them. So there's agricultural programs. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. That's getting a lot of attention right now. Disability, if somebody is 100% disabled, there's an additional exemption. They need to be a homeowner. So if you're disabled, you need to also be in the homeowner program. There's Public Utilities Commission exemptions. That means they're paying to the Treasury office instead of to us. Kuleana exemptions, and that's if the person who owns the property now is they can prove through genealogy that they're related to the original person who is given a Kuleana parcel, then they can get a minimum tax, which is $200. It doesn't really matter what they're doing with the property. The caveat is that is through OHA. So they need to get the OHA verification letter. They're the ones who give it, or court. I haven't seen any come from court yet. It's all been through OHA. So it's not for any parcel where someone of Native Hawaiian ancestry has gotten it. It has to be given to them through a kuleana. And it doesn't matter if between that original person and this person who owns it now, it's left their hands 10 or 15 times. As long as they can prove their lineage, then they'll get the exemption. Veterans, if you have any clients that are totally disabled due to a service-related incident, then they also pay half minimum tax. So they would pay $100 tax. And that doesn't matter if their properties were $20,000 or $3 million. That's pretty much the range we have right now. And there's other charitable and miscellaneous, so most of it is nonprofits. And again, all exemptions do require an application. If all of our applications are online and all of our deadlines are posted there as well. Okay, so the tax classifications and rates, the last time I talked, I always harp on when values go up, I'm a firm believer tax rates should come down. And that's kind of how you balance out the taxes. That is not what has been happening. However, the tax rates did come down a little bit for 2 categories this past year, and it's only county council who can approve this. So the mayor can make suggestions based on the budget, but it's county council who has to approve it. It was $6.15 per thousand. Right now it's $5.95. So you'll see that in the bills that is being mailed out today, actually. So the vendor's sending out all the tax bills for the August 20 due date today. There was nothing else anybody needed to apply for. It automatically happens. Yes?
Affordable rental, there's a limit to what you can rent.
Yes.
A 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom.
Correct.
What are those right now?
So they open the programs up every year in October because HUD has to give to, so just for the question for everybody on Zoom in case you didn't hear it, for the affordable rental program, what is the allowed monthly rents? And I do have that. I don't have it in this slide presentation, but I can get it to you all, what it was for last year. So every year in October, we open up the application period. HUD tells housing what they can charge or what's allowed. And then housing has to take 75% of that and tell us what the maximum monthly affordable rental amount can be. Then every year between October and December, we collect about 1,200 applications. And then you apply for the program, and it does need to have an updated contract. That's been a real hassle for a lot of people. The deadline has been another hassle. That's every year you gotta apply for that program. The one nice thing about it, well, 2, 1, you get the lowest tax rate, but 3, you get the 3% cap, and that's huge.
That applies if, say you have your home that you live in, and you're owner or occupant, and then you have an additional dwelling unit.
Yes.
It used to be a fund,
Yes.
and that's rented under the affordable rental amount.
Yes.
So the $595 applies to both of those.
Correct. It would apply to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because right now, as it stands, if you don't have an affordable rental application for that second house, then you don't get the homeowner tax costs. You would pay the $11.10 usually.
It used to pay.
Yes.
Even though it was lower. rent,
Correct.
You used to have to pay that.
Yeah, so the affordable rental's good, but I'm gonna actually share a slide coming up where there's a bill before the finance committee to kind of change that, so it wouldn't be only for affordable rental. Yes,
So it's really hard to hit the affordable rental in Kona because the limits are so low?
yes.
Is anyone working on
So the issue, it was worse for a couple of years. So her question, and I don't know how well this picks up,
that?
was,
repeating.
yeah, okay. So her question was, the affordable rental limits on this program is so low for West Hawaii. Is anybody working to resolve that? And I don't understand. We've gone to housing to ask how come HUD has such low amounts for this area, and we got a very long answer about the surveys that HUD collects on the amount people are charging. And they don't know if the amount people are reporting is underreported because that's what they're reporting to GE tax. I honestly don't have an answer for why it's so low. They did look into increasing it to 100%, but there's a different bill that's coming up on Tuesday that I'm kind of hoping some people here today are interested in, because I think the affordable rental tax class is great when that's your only house on there and you're not living there, right? Then you can get that lower rate. Personally, if they told us, if the homeowner's there, don't worry about anything else, we would be fine. Our office would be happy, nothing to enforce. But there is a bill that would at least allow long-term rentals, whether it's same dwelling, same structure, and believe it or not, people have different definitions of that, or a separate dwelling. So I'm gonna cover that one a little bit more, but when it comes to the allowed monthly rent, I know they raised it and they went back to having 2 different categories by zip codes, which mostly was East Hawaii was a lower amount, West Hawaii was a little higher. Still really far off from the market.
Right, you don't save enough in
Correct.
taxes to charge the lower rent.
Yeah, especially if you're new going into it. If you've been into it for a lot of years, the 3% cap is helping to keep it down. But first buying a property and getting into it, you are not gonna see that savings. It's not gonna work out. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the homeowner application. So another thing that happened this past year, council did a lot of changes. And this year, it's an election year, and there's a lot more changes. So one of the things that happened 2 years ago was council increased all of the age exemptions. But last year, they added an additional category. So at the age of 80, yeah, you get the 125,000. Now that's your base amount, no matter what your properties were. If your property is worth more than 500,000, you could get 225,000 exemption. So it's really gone up for, so it's only towards the house for the oldest applicant. It doesn't matter if you got 10 people there, but it's the oldest applicant. But I would definitely watch that, make sure we got your birth date in there. You don't have to call and apply for that. As long as you provided your driver's license or confirmed a birth date, that's automatic. But you would be surprised how many people refuse to supply a birth date. And if they refuse to, for whatever reason, we cannot give the additional age exemption because I have nothing to verify how old you are. But for the most part, I would say 95% of all applicants in the homeowner program was fine providing their date of birth with verification. It's just us looking at your driver license and hitting verify. So yes, you can get, I'm under 60 still, so I would only get 150,000, but my husband turned 60 last year. So ours went up to 185,000. And then, so it's always gonna track him as the primary, which I don't personally like, but it's because he's older. It doesn't have to be, it's not because he's head of household, it's just because of the age. Yeah, I know, I don't like that much, but it is what it is. Okay, so again, for West Hawaii, most people are maxing out on their home exemption. If your property's worth less than 500,000, then you get an additional 20%, but it's up to $100,000. So that's where it kind of, the property's only worth 300,000, you're not gonna see the 225 exemption. And that helps lower your taxable value. So every little bit helps, right? They have the 3% cap, so your property can't go up this high. Now you get the exemption and you get the lower tax rate. I'm not saying our taxes are cheap, they're still high, but they're trying to take care of it, and I think they always will because the homeowners are the voters. All right, there is one other part in here that does get confusing. So we are the one county in Hawaii that has a half-year exemption. So the rest of the counties, you have to apply by this date. If you miss that deadline, you wait up to a year and a half to get it. So here there's two deadlines. There's June 30 and December 31st. It's still a long wait. I'm not gonna pretend it's not. If you apply by June 30th of the year, you will get it in the following January. But if you remember, your next deadline is December 31st and you gotta wait all the way till the following July. So that sounds not too bad, but let's say it was August. I would still have to wait till the following July to get the exemption.
No, are you
Yes.
saying that we have to apply for that every year?
No, that's
Once
when
we
you
have
first
that,
apply,
then-
correct.
Then it doesn't change, we're
Yes.
okay on that.
Sometimes they'll ask for a refiling if there's something that comes up. Usually when people move, if the post office tells us somebody's moved, we'll send a, hey, we got notification you moved, please reapply, or if you're not in the house anymore, you don't qualify for this. And then it gets followed up by a disallowance of the home exemption letter. It's amazing how many people move. The post office tells us they've moved to the mainland, but they call and they say, oh, I'm only here for a little bit and I'll be right back, but it's a permanent move, not a temporary address change.
And then what about death?
Mm.
And like now a house that someone lived in and had a homeowner exemption, but they passed away, what does that do at that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. Her question is if somebody dies, what happens then with the home exemption? So sometimes there's couples and one passes away, then the spouse that was on the home exemption, then that becomes the primary, right? If she wasn't or he wasn't already. But we would still send a letter that just says, you know, through the vital statistics records is one example. We see that this person or individual passed away on this date and it's a go forward. You will be removed if somebody else is living there, if you've transferred, they need to apply for the home exemption. Yeah. Okay, so here's an example of the homeowner taxes, and in full disclosure, this is my own property, and I just wanted to show how the 3% cap helped. So I bought, my husband and I, excuse me, I forget about him. We bought the property in December of 2009 for $715,000 in Waimea. We appealed taxes. I wasn't working for real property. I was a fee appraiser working in IT. And we appealed because the county had it much higher. And I was one of those people who thought, how stupid. I just paid this in December 11. You guys assessed January 1st. How did you miss it? And I didn't know enough about real property tax to realize, oh, they look at a big load of properties. But more than that, I didn't notice that they had actually coded, you know how I said go to the real property tax records and see what's a lanai carport? They had a true legitimate carport coded as living area. And it was a large carport. It was not living area, it never was. The guy before us had a bunch of tools, he ran a construction company. But living area to a carport, it's a big difference on the taxes. But if you're just driving by from the street, I can see how that's confusing. I mean, they did make it look nice, there was windows. And they were blind, so they couldn't see in it, so they assumed it was living area. And remember, it doesn't have to be permitted for us to pick it up as such. So if we see it, we pick it up with what we see, not what you permitted. So we applied right away. Our realtor was really good. He hounded us. He made sure we did it at the time of closing, just in case the escrow company didn't submit it in time. He came to us and it was Christmas Eve. Came with a little basket and was like, you need to fill this form and take it in. And I was like, seriously? I work at the county. I'm sure it's good. He's like, no, you can't trust anybody. You need to take it in. So we did. We took it in. It did get submitted twice. That's okay. 2 times is better than none, because that deadline is December 31st. So we got to keep our exemption. More importantly, that cap started. Because I don't get to keep the prior owner's market value, right? It resets because I'm the new owner. So through the years, the market value of the land and building on our property has gone up to a point I could never afford it. So it's at 1.3 million, but with the 3% cap, it's at 936,000. Still way more than 715,000, but way less than what the market is. So our exemptions, because as I said, my husband turned 60 last year because he's older, we get the full amount of 185,000. So our net taxable is 751,000. That's just a little bit more than what we paid for it. What is that now? Almost 15 years ago, 14 and a half years. We get the lower tax rate because they just lowered the tax rate. So our taxes are still what I think is very high. It's coming out of my mortgage, $4,468. However, if I did not have the homeowner tax class, so let's say I was doing a short-term rental in part of my house, my taxes would be $12,933.72. That looks like a comma, it should be a period, it's not 12 million. If we didn't live there at all and we were renting it out or letting it sit vacant and it was our second home because we had a fabulous place somewhere else that we went to, we'd be paying almost 15,000 in
I
taxes.
see it all the time.
Yeah, it's very, very high. So when people wonder, they get mad. I've lived here for 5 years. I didn't know I had to apply for the home exemption. Can't you retro it? Nothing allows us to retroactivate it. It's a go forward program. So if you can help by letting your buyers know to apply, yes.
You have the market value up there.
Yes.
I don't see that anywhere on real property tax. I only see the assessed value, which takes into account the 3% cap. Is that a value that we can see?
Yeah, I thought the market value was on the website. I'm pretty sure it's there. Is it not there?
I
It's
think
on
it's
there?
only with the 3% cap.
No.
Is it not capped on there?
Yeah, I don't know. Other people are saying it's on there. I can't switch to this from here.
I'll
But
check it out again.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it will show your market value. It'll show your, it may not have it combined, but I thought it was separate at least. Land is one number, building is a
Right.
number. And it'll show dedicated, like an agricultural, that value, and an assessed value to show where it's capped.
Okay,
So it should have
so-
split them both up.
Okay,
Now, if something changed though, I have to admit, I didn't check in the last 2 days because I was on the
oh
website
no,
looking.
I haven't.
Okay,
I thought it was like that.
Yeah.
ongoing. So
no,
I'll check
yeah,
it
we
out.
usually post both of them. And part of that is because when we roll back to market value, so we like to keep that on there.
We do have a question.
Oh, you have a question on Zoom? Okay.
April, go ahead.
Thank you. I just was wondering, in your carport example, I've had a few buyers ask that all of a sudden lanai or something on the back side of their house was added onto the property tax website. And I was curious, you mentioned drive-by, but do the assessors go onto people's property, kind of measure things in the back, that kind of thing? Because I've had some buyers really concerned about privacy and who's coming. They don't care about the tax, but they're more concerned about people snooping around in their backyard.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Unfortunately, I mean, and this may come to be changing very shortly. There is a part in the code that in order for us to exercise our duties, if we have to go onto a property to pick up areas that we see in imagery that we don't have on our records, we can go on any property. If it has a no trespassing sign, if you want to get around that, and I don't know if there's real wood, I would put up a no trespassing sign. Staff are not supposed to go on your property if there's a no trespassing sign. I'm not going to be completely hypocritical and say I don't have staff that have done it. I have told them they're not supposed to, and that's what Corp Counsel has told us. And Corp Counsel is our attorneys. If you see a no trespassing sign, don't go. Now, if you've applied for an appeal, we typically usually have to go on the property so we can take pictures for the appeal process. But that's a whole nother issue. Same thing with agriculture. We usually have to go on to verify that's the ag that you claim you're doing. Some of them, if they are fenced in and it's gotten picked up, it could have been through pictometry reviews. They have oblique images. I don't care for that because you're not always getting the accurate thing. Sometimes it looks like it's a really nice extension and it's nothing more than a really nice roof and an unfinished area. But they can always call the office and talk to the appraiser or another staff person. They can look up on their entrance code what they actually used, if they went on site or not.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they can ask at the office if somebody was on site or
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I just had some people really kind of shocked, like, oh my gosh, what if I was, changing my bedroom with the, windows open or something, and I don't know. So I think it was more of a privacy thing, and nobody that has talked to me has been concerned about paying the extra tax, but they
Yeah,
just,
I'm not gonna lie, as a fee appraiser, we schedule and make appointments, but we're not doing like, some appraisers have to go out for the county and pick up 50 to 60 buildings a day. So they are not scheduling, we were, it was shared with us last night, and I actually thought it wasn't a bad idea that we just send out cards to everybody we're planning to resurvey and just says, we're gonna be in your area, you'll see us, we will have to come on your property. And just something for notification, I did like that, it just,
yeah, I
it
think
just
that
had
would
to
be
be
nice,
there.
giving people a
Yeah.
heads up at least.
Yeah, it's hard to call everybody and make an appointment. I mean, we're not as bad as, I don't want to be like Sears, hey, we might be here on this day between 7 hours, but at least to give a heads up. I don't think it's a bad idea, but we just need to look into it and figure out how to make it work with our budget. Yes.
The water department has just sent out letters saying they're gonna come and inspect our house connection to water.
Yeah, okay. She said the water department sent them letters that they're coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
don't think
Helco does the same thing, kind of, if they're going to be replacing a meter or something. It just seems like safety for your people as well, with dogs and other things that might be.
it's been getting very dangerous for our appraisers, especially on certain parts of the island where there's a lot of squatters and theft. Our staff have been approached with guns, they've been chased by dogs. During appeal times, when it's contentious, it's gotten pretty ugly too. So yeah, it is getting worse. So I don't think our staff are gonna balk at it. I just gotta make sure we get the support to pay for it, because with postage going up, it doesn't seem like much, but we do about 15,000 inspections a year. And so it's just a little bit more coordinating. But hopefully we'll get there. I don't think that needs a code change, I just think it's a process change. Sorry, yeah, I think this died.
There we go, should be okay.
Okay, so the top 2 complaints, I know I bring this up every time, and I'm sorry, but it's, my realtor title company never told me I had to file the home exemption. New buyers in Hawaii do not like it when our staff tell them, well, it's not their responsibility to educate you. That's, you need to also follow through and try and reach out and understand what the laws are. That never goes well for us. Or why does the home exemption or any exemption take so long to kick in? And the answer to that doesn't make them happy either. It's a budgetary process with the county. It's out of our control of when it happens. But we just follow the code. They don't like that. In California, it's immediate, but their exemption is $7,000. Ours can be up to $225,000, so it's a big difference. Okay. All right, rentals. So this is the bills that are coming up, and I'm hoping to get some interest from anybody here that might want to testify, whether it's for it or against it. We were talking, and we brought this up before, and I know you're very well versed on it, about the issues our office has. And actually this came up last night as well. So there is some ambiguity or conflicts within the code, and you may wonder, how is that even possible? Well, councils change. And so 1 year a focus on council might be short-term rental, and so they make rules on this, or excuse me, they change the county code on it. But they don't change everywhere that applies to in our county code. 1, it is very confusing. 2, they just didn't think that it affected another area. So the county has taken, or it has in the past, a very in favor of the taxpayer approach when it comes to long-term rentals within the house. So the issue we were having is, if I live in my property and let's say I rented out a room downstairs, how we've always looked at it is, you get the home exemption, it's long-term rental, you still get your homeowner tax class, you're fine. There is one part in the part about homeowner tax class on the tax class side, not the exemption says you can do it. The tax class says that you can't have commercial activity. Now you can actually get the lower ag value plus the homeowner tax class. That's great. That's helped a lot of farmers living on their land, so they get the 3% cap. But it does have a little thing that there can be no rental activity. So we took that as no short-term rental activity, no rental activity at all. And we never know if it's a separate unit, we don't know if it's a separate dwelling. Well, we can on imagery, but even if it's within the same dwelling, we don't know if there's an interior staircase or not. So we usually take it from the conservative approach of leaving the homeowner tax class. When there is no rule created or when there's ambiguity in the code, this will come up from time to time, where I will have an employee that states, you're wrong, the code's wrong, how you've been processing it's wrong. I'm reading this one word in the code, so I'm gonna disallow the homeowner tax class. That should not happen. However, I don't know if you've run across anybody like this who just will either not acknowledge anybody of a higher authority or feel like, well, I don't see where it's written in any rule or code otherwise, so I'm going to remove it. When it goes to appeal, we're going to always recommend to the board to give it back. But it causes the owner a lot of heartburn, right? It causes me heartburn. And I'm not going to mince words, it's a union environment. And so there's only so much I can do, because technically he's right, it is in the code this way. However, that's not been the process. There is no administrative rule on this particular thing. And so the rules are important, but in this case, we actually asked county council to take a look at the code. And it's very, very rare that our office will go to county council and ask them to do something, because we try to stay out of council, especially during election years. But we asked them to look at allowing any long-term rentals where the homeowner is residing. Then there's no issue. If you're doing long-term rental and that is 180 days or over, and I'm sorry, I know that's a whole nother long topic, but for us, it's always been that way since the 70s in our side, to just set the homeowner tax class. We don't have to worry about if it's a room, if it's in the same building, if it's in a different dwelling, if it's a farm dwelling. I don't care about any of that. Just let it be. The homeowner's there, fine. I know it would be a reach to ask them to allow it for short term, but you know, just get your toe in there and hopefully allow the long term. The reason for that is now people are saying, and we have neighbors turning in other people, and it's getting very complicated because they read in that code that one word, no rental. And they're like, that's a commercial activity. We shouldn't allow it. I'm like, well, we don't view commercial activity that same way. That because you have a long-term rental, it could be your son's best friend that needed a place to stay. Yeah, it could be your son. Yeah, if you're lucky enough to collect rent from your child, yeah, then that's awesome, yeah.
Pay taxes.
None of my kids pay anything, but you can, so anyway, that bill is before council. It went to county council before, and they postponed it. They didn't, the majority didn't like it. There's not enough testifiers there in support of it, and so they didn't feel it was important. I'm gonna be there on Tuesday at 1 p.m. and to explain to them just how much confusion this has been. And if we're trying to encourage, this is my pitch, if we're trying to encourage long-term housing, then provide some tax incentives for it. I get they're going after short-term, that's a whole nother issue. I don't think getting harder on short-term is gonna open up long-term rentals. Because I've heard from a lot of people, the tenancy laws are too strict. I've done this testimony at council. I'm never switching to that, that's fine. But at least let the long-term ones continue to get their homeowner tax class. So that's our pitch. That's also in line with if they allow this ADU bill to go through where it's easier for you to build additional area. And they're using the reason for that as homeowners. We want owners to build extra areas. There's no incentive for them to do that. We'll tax them more, they'll rent it out, they'll lose the tax class. It makes no sense. Like if you really want to do it, you're gonna have to allow for long-term rental. So if you know anybody that might want to come out, that's been here for a while, that knows they would either build ADU or do the long-term rental, or they're already doing it, that would be great. I'm not sitting there taking names to see, oh my gosh, I'm gonna check if I'm giving them the homeowner tax class. And they don't have to state where they are or even give their last name. But I think when council doesn't see it, they only ever see people come out to bash a bill. But when it's in support, it's hard to get these bills moving forward. Bill 173 creates a long-term rental tax class. It would be like the affordable rental tax class, except no maximum monthly rental amount. Yes, however, what that tax rate is unknown. So we had asked them, put in there what that tax rate is for the first year. So it was in there, it was 130% of the homeowner tax class. Because why would you ever apply for a program if you have no idea about where the tax class is gonna be? You don't know if it's gonna be higher than the residential. You don't know what they're gonna do. But council made the maker of the bill take it out, so I'm gonna go before council on Wednesday and ask them to put it back in. So that when people call us and ask us what's the incentive, we can at least give them an answer. For the first year, if they don't wanna tie it to anything, that's fine. But our idea is if you don't make it lower than the ag tax class and a little higher than homeowner, you're not gonna get anybody to wanna apply for that. You gotta give them some kind of information. All right, is there anybody online that had questions on this screen? No? Okay. All right, our schedule and deadlines, there's a guy in our office that loves these.
Yeah,
types
Lisa,
of-
sorry. I do have a question. So just clarifying, any rental, the homeowner loses their cap, the 3% cap, no matter what kind of rental they do.
Yes and no, so in the code, that would be a yes. How we've been interpreting it, because there is a conflict with that with homeowner exemptions, that if it was a long-term rental within the same building, you would not lose the homeowner tax class.
I see.
I'm trying to get county council to do is confirm that it's okay to allow long-term rental. That's our ask, at least, to allow long-term rental to keep the homeowner tax class. And I don't
That's
know,
our big
people
ask.
may come out and tell me I'm crazy, they don't want it. That's fine. It's just what we're seeing from the public is it's kind of going against what the purpose was. And to be honest, the code was codified in like 1981. They didn't realize how bad our housing shortage was going to be. I don't think they realized how many people that we would do short-term rental like it is now. So if they're trying to push housing, I think they need to provide more tax incentive.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa, I have a neighbor that has an Airbnb,
Mhm.
3-bedroom, 2-bath upstairs. Downstairs, she has a long-term rental tenant, and then next to that, she has an area that she stays in occasionally. Well, now she's lost her homeowner's exemption. Are you saying that because she's living in, she says she's living there, that this bill would turn it around and she would
No.
get total, okay.
Yeah, sorry. So her question is, she has a neighbor that has short-term rental, long-term rental, and a room for herself. No, this bill it still doesn't allow for short-term. We're just trying to get long-term through. I think for me to even suggest short-term, one, it would be a complete nightmare because it would be really long meetings and I've had enough with ag. But I think for the purpose of this, we're at least trying to get long-term through. Yeah, and like I said, it got postponed at the last finance committee. If it doesn't get enough support, they'll postpone it to the call of the chair, which means it dies. Yeah, and I'd like to see something positive come out of this year when it comes to real property tax. This would actually lessen the enforcement our office has to do. So when people call in are complaining, oh, they have this long-term tenant, it doesn't matter, they live there. You know, we don't have to figure out if you have one little pole connecting the two houses, if it's considered the same dwelling. I mean, it gets really crazy. If they have a separate kitchen, I don't want to worry if there's a separate kitchen. And what's a kitchen? If you're in planning department, a kitchen is a sink and any heating utensil. I mean, I think that's nuts. You know, I consider it a kitchen, and so does building. You have to have counter space. You have to have food prep, refrigeration, and cooking. So I mean, I get where planning has to have their own rules, but to me, you know, almost every hotel has a kitchen, and that's just not right. That's just Lisa's opinion, that's not the opinion of real property tax, where they will never let me present again. Okay, so schedules and deadlines, one of the guys in our office, he loves schedules.
I have a question on that last screen too. Sorry. Okay, it is this. I had two elderly clients come to me about a month or two ago. Apparently your department is doing I forget what the term is, but you check the TAT records with what homeowners are claiming. And these people, I mean, one is in her late 70s and she's on fixed income and she had been renting short term in part of her house, uh, basically to help defray the cost of still living here. She's lived here 60 years in her house. And got a letter and was hit for back taxes because her homeowner was revoked retroactively. Got a bill for $28,000 in back taxes, and her property tax is going from $2,500 up to $23,000 a year, and basically devastated her life. She's now going to be forced to sell her house, and there's no way to undo that. She was weeping, going, "Well, I called the county tax department and said, I promise I'll never short-term rental again. You got to keep you got to get my, assessment back to what it was." And the answer was no. To me, okay, to me, that's the wrong way to do it. Okay. And then I'm looking at your rentals thing here and it says less than 180 days. Well, okay, month to month is 30 days at a time. How does that work? I mean, you can only lease for long term over 6 months. You can't do month to month rental. A couple of things I just thought I'd point out, but I think the better approach when you have an issue like my friends that had the short-term rental, who a lot of people don't even watch the news anymore. They don't read the paper. The paper doesn't have anything in it anyway. They're just blindsided by this. And basically the end result is gentrification. They sell their house, someone rich from the mainland moves in, and the long-term resident whose kids were born and raised here is off to the mainland like the Hawaiians. Bad approach. Got to be some other, you should send out a warning and go, hey, here's what we're going to do. You may not be aware of it, but here's what it is, and work with them. To me, that's just crazy.
Okay, so there's two parts to it. I calculated if her taxes are $23,000 a year, that means her property's worth more than $2 million. So that's one part of it. The second part, I do understand the frustration with it. The max we can go back is current plus 2 years. That means she's had reviews for that entire time that she's been making money on it. I do understand how frustrating it is. The code and the rules, I mean, it's pretty strict right now when it comes to anything under 180 days. That does not apply to long-term that only has month-to-month leases. So if it's within their house and you're renting a room, we're not asking for leases even. All we need to know is long-term. The catch would have been somebody reported it. TAT doesn't provide us information, so I don't know what was written on there, but TAT, the state, does not provide us any information at all. So it could have been either a review or a complaint that was found. And a lot of people that are unhappy with their short-term vacation rental situation when they visit, they're the biggest complainers that will turn people in because they feel like, it wasn't legitimate, I didn't like this person, it's not, everyone's like, oh, it was that neighbor, it was that nosy neighbor. Not always, a lot of times it was actually the visitors to the property. So I want to share that. I don't think it's a bad idea, I think what your idea is good. That's just something way above my head. And I haven't gotten much sympathy from people above me on the short-term rental industry. I know there's a lot of local people, even in my neighborhood, that rent out a room. The kids are gone, they have the extra space. It helps with money, especially if they've retired. But at this point, I'm just even trying to get the long-term rental to go through. So if I can't even get long-term rental through, there's no way I'm going to convince anybody to allow short-term. But yeah, the current plus 2 years is rough. Even if they stop it today, they reapply and it's a go forward. That has been really rough, and there's been some really nice people that have lost it. But I will share your concerns. I don't have the authority to change that right now, but I get what you're saying.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, schedule and deadlines, deadlines are huge. We have deadlines almost on every application and for every property. I think the big thing to remember is our assessment notices go out in March. Appeal deadline is April 9th. Every year it never changes unless that falls on a Saturday or Sunday. It goes to the following Monday. Taxes are always due on August 20 and February 20. All of our mail in Hawaii goes to Honolulu to get postmarked, so don't wait till the last day to drop it in the bin. If you're gonna wait till the last day, walk it into the post office, watch them stamp it. I'm not gonna lie, I love the post office. If it's something that's important, I don't use the post office anymore. I will walk it to wherever I'm going and grab a receipt. Takes a lot more time, but I too have had a lot of bills not show up where it needed to. Okay, agricultural programs. So here I thought I was going to have this great lengthy discussion about this today. We had a huge public hearing last night. So County Council, for those of you that aren't aware, made big changes last year in 2023. Council changes the code. The code's the law that our offices live by. And then the county offices have to follow that law. So most of you are watching the STVR, the TAR, whatever it's called today. That's still at the council level, so planning is not actioning the new things they're trying to propose. So this passed last year. I don't know what type of outreach the makers did, I couldn't tell you. But we have to have something in place by September 2nd. We went from 2 programs to 3. They got rid of the non-dedicated ag program. And then because it's an election year, there have been a lot of podcasts and posts on it on social media. Some of it correct. I'm not going to say all of it was wrong. Some were very inaccurate to the point we had people not even in an agricultural program, just in agricultural zoning, thinking their values were going to go up by 1,000% because that's what the podcast said. I love social media and I hate social media. And this is a great example. And so there's part of me that has this fight or flight instinct that wants to fight back. Your government, we can't do it. We just sit back, try and share the truth, and explain how it does happen or what will be affected. It's caused about 200 to 300 phone calls to our offices daily, not to mention the threats and everything else the staff are getting when they had nothing to do with the change. It happened at the council level, so we sent out letters on June 14th because I felt like all the people in this should know there was something done. Granted, it was late, but it took us about 8 months to figure out what that code change was. We have to work with attorneys, sit down, hash it out, go through it, because I have to explain to the staff, this is how we implement the program. And it would seem like it makes sense, but if you read the code and the rules, I think you would see this one is extremely confusing. It's not straightforward. So we had the public hearing last night, and that was the first time when they got our letter that most people even knew this was at council. A lot of people don't get the newspaper today. It was in the paper 5 times. I don't even get the newspaper anymore. I'll go online and read stuff, but if it doesn't catch my eye, I'm zooming on to the next thing, right? I'm looking at obituaries. How old was somebody when they died? Am I close to that age? So I miss a lot of the important things that I should be reading, but that's the reality. That's what I'm looking at. So I know others are as well. So they got the letter, and then they might hear a podcast, or even just based on our letter, they think, what is this? I'm losing it. And there are over 7,800 people in the non-dedicated ag program, which we mailed out over 11,000 letters for, because every owner with an address or lessee got a copy of that notice. So last night we did go to the public hearing to explain, well, this was my synopsis of what happened with the county's ag programs. They went from 2 to 3, different programs. What prompted the change? County Council hired an auditor to do an audit on real property tax back in 2011. They completed the outside audit in 2012, and it pretty much came down on real property tax in a lot of areas, including enforcement. Enforcement on ag was difficult. The ag program was too big. You guys need to go in and set up parameters. So then council creates all these working groups, task force, ad hoc. They get the report, sits there, council changes, nothing happens. So that happened over the next 8 years. And then now somebody's like, okay, we should do something. But the gist of what I got from last night was not only were people not aware of the changes, they weren't at the table. The wrong people they felt were at the table for the discussion. So if I had to tell you what was gonna happen with the ag program today, based on last night, all I can say is I believe the finance director, who's my boss, is going to look at, we're gonna re-review all of the testimonies, because we had a ton submitted last night. So the hearing started at 5 p.m. and went till 7:45. We had a lot of testimonies in live on Zoom. We did a presentation to explain our interpretation of what we thought the code did, and then what the rule was doing, down to what we have to do. And it did quell some of the angst, but I think there's still a lot of other issues with it because people didn't feel like they were heard back in the council side. And I get it, people look at it, it's all government. You know, they don't know county council's elected. I'm a peon down here in real property tax, just trying to do a program. We're all government, so we're all crooked and we did it together. So it's going to be relooked at. I don't know where that leaves us. We have programs in the code starting on September 2nd. I don't know if we're going through with it, if they're gonna stop it, or if they're gonna push forward at this moment. I just don't know. I did provide her to West Hawaii Association of Realtors my presentation of last night, in case you want to download it. I do a lot of ad-libbing, if you didn't notice, because I hate going to presentations where they just read off a slide. Our attorneys hate it that I do that because they want me to stick to the slideshow, because then there's, you know, no confusion. But sometimes this covers a lot. You can read it in your time or go back to it as a reference. Again, this is some of the information that was back on it. We had it posted on our website since June 14th. We mailed the letters, 30-day notice of the hearing. I do have a benefits and requirements. So everybody here in person got an 11/17. It's two-sided. That was something we created for our staff to take a quick look at what the what differences are with all our programs, because it's a lot. I also provided that to West Hawaii. Did you already email those out?
No.
Okay, so that will be sent to you all after. What we have online still needs to be updated. So I just wanted to let you know you have the most current version of it. Again, here's all the benefits. It compares the non-dedicated, this new one called Community Food Sustainability, a short-term 3-year program, and the long-term 10-year. So if you go to the website now, you will not see draft revised July 17th. Same thing with the requirements. You see a lot of new requirements on there. Please look, I tried to underline the ors. A lot that was put out there was, it was like one of the, you need all of the following 6 requirements. It's usually one of the following requirements. Here's the one that I think there was a lot of confusion, the value per acre. So I'm going to use an example of a 10-acre parcel in West Hawaii. That might be worth $500,000. I know that's low or high, depending on what part of Kona. But taxes on a $500,000 parcel at market value, and the tax rate is $935, is $4,675. If you had that same 10 acres in our highest valued ag category, that would be your short-term dedicated 3 years. I'm not going to touch the food sustainability. I'll get into that one. But that's 4,000. That's the same as your non-dedicated ag now, if you're used to the non-dedicated. Your taxes would be $374. So it's a big difference. It's a huge savings, which is good. We want to continue to support that. The area we've seen the most abuse and what was reported was in our pasture category. And the reason for that is that 10 acres, the lowest pasture category is $14 value an acre. So your taxes on that area would be so low that you wouldn't even hit the minimum tax of $200. And so I think council was trying to stop the gentleman farming where somebody doesn't live here, has a nice $1 million house, 10 acres, 1 sheep, and get them out. Did the baby go out with the bathwater? Uh-huh. And so that was a lot of what was going on last night, like make the programs, but you're hurting a lot of local families and local people. And there's many different parts to it. It's not just that one thing. There were lots of others. I couldn't tell you today what administration is gonna do, what they're gonna tell us. Hopefully it's figured out before council hearings, board review hearings. But the sticking one is the community food sustainability. So that $400,000 at 30% of market would end up paying $1,122. So it's not as good as the non-dedicated. And I think that is definitely scary for our office as well as the public, because it's not giving them enough of a break to continue to do their agriculture activities.
I have a question.
Yes.
There was something that came up last night about the properties that were less than 10 acres.
Yes.
And the ag program not being part of the program anymore.
Correct. So there's an or on there, and let me see if I have that here. So it's minimum lot sizes are applied in the rules, and the 10 acres is specifically when it comes to pasture. So it was minimum sizes, but then there's the or that says, basically you need to justify, that's not the exact wording, hold on, I have it here. This is not a time for me to start using my memory.
Sorry.
No, that's okay, I just wanna make sure I get the words right. Okay. It allows for non-contiguous parcels to meet the minimum size. If the minimum size is not met, the dedication, so your application, must reflect a commercially viable agriculture operation for lower or smaller lots, and that can be provided in a farm plan. So the minimum sizes are there as a guide, but if you're not meeting it, well, one, your farm operation can be multiple parcels. It can be non-contiguous. It doesn't even have to be in the same area, district. It does need to be on this island, because that's what our code is pertaining to. But if the farm plan explains or shares why it's still, your 1 acre is supportive because you're rotating it on other properties, that's all the farm plan needed. I think the concern, and it is valid from the community, that's nice that that's how we're interpreting it, but because the code says this, and our rules might say something else, I think people are concerned that somebody might point back to the code and not utilize that, or that the rules weren't specific enough for them to be able to make that interpretation either. Yeah. So we had over 200 in attendance in person in Hilo last night. 2 in Kona. Part of that was because originally we couldn't get any rooms in Kona, and over 240 on Zoom. So I believe that was a significant number that hopefully, I think, those that are above me that have decision-making power can take more time to look through it. Okay, so this was the other handout I did share, was the agricultural use values. Just remember that's value per acre, not your taxes. Okay, so, and on the back side it has your native forests, successional forests, functional forest. There's a lot of other programs that are in this program that will help get your taxes lower so they're more manageable. But I'd like to open it up if you have any other questions.
Yes, I have a comment on the grazing. I have a client again, and I'm sure you're probably aware of this, that we had a change in the assessors assigned to North Kona, the Mauka properties in particular. And I've had a lot of ranchers, farmers who saw their tax assessments skyrocket. I have one guy that's got 100 acres. He paid 640,000 for it. Basically, very near the peak of the market in 05. It's been going up the market value continually till now it's 1.6 million. You bring in a new assessor and the assessor cancels his grazing. According to the assessor, who's never visited the property, he saw too many trees on the property on his aerial. I guess he's using Google Maps or whatever. I don't know what your pictometry is. And so in his opinion, because there was a lot of trees on the property, which has been a ranch in grazing for about 150 years, in his opinion, it was not viable for grazing. And it's too high for coffee. It's too wet for growing anything else, but it is really good for grazing in actual reality. And he then jumped his assessment from 1.6 to 3.6 million. And when my client, who lives on the mainland and has a grazing agreement with a local rancher who depends on this property for a lot of his pasture, when he conversed with your assessor, the assessor told him, well, if you don't like it, sell your property. Okay, that's one example. So I started looking around to see, well, how is this affecting other parts of the island? And by chance, I came across two parcels directly across from the Manalani Bay Resort, where that abandoned multifamily is. And I think everybody here can agree there's no grazing across from the Manalani Resort highway there entrance. It's simply lava. There's not even fountain grass. There's no water source. There's a property there, 660 acres. They paid 17 million for. Back about 15 years ago, they're paying $2,574 in property tax based on grazing. The other one is 100 acres owned by a prominent Hilo man who's since deceased. They're paying $200 for a piece of lava in grazing. And that's current assessed values. So something's broken.
Yeah, I agree, something's not right. I don't know about this particular case. How long ago did they get their assessment, and did they appeal or talk to anybody else?
Well, by the time he got it, he's a pathologist on the mainland. And by the time he got it in the mail and called me up, and I says, well, you should talk to the assessor first. And the assessor, by the time they talked, it was past the date of appeal. And he just goes, well, you're out of luck. For me, I would have appealed immediately, because anything over 20% increase in assessment, you're going to win your appeal unless there's an overwhelming reason why not. But that's just a couple of examples that I've come across, and I can come up with a lot more, but I just don't, want to be the always poking, you're doing your job, we're doing our job. But as realtors, we hear the stories too. And a lot of times I hear the stories and I want to hear both sides. To give you an example, we had a client in South Kona who called up my agent and was freaking out because her assessment doubled on her 5 acres. And I says, well, do you have any unpermitted dwellings there? Oh yeah, I do have one. I go, well, that's why. They looked on their pictometry, picked up your additional dwelling, and the assessors doing their job and saw you have 2 houses, not one. And they went to the tax office, and sure enough, and so she quietly paid her taxes and there was no problem. So there's 2 sides to every story, but I'm just giving you some examples that prove to me that everybody's not being treated equally in the county, and that's what gets under people's skin.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that some need better. I mean, I would have to look at each one individually to see. I think the one you're talking about is Ainalea, and I mean, they have had.
Next to Ainalea.
It's next to it, okay, then I'd have to take a better look. I don't have my computer here, so I couldn't go through it, but I definitely want to look into the one. They should, if you're gonna lose an exemption or a program, then usually there's a disallowance letter that's sent. And then there's the amended notice, so there's 2 that have gone out, so that means that would have been over a 60-day period that the owner usually ignores. So I mean,
Well, I solved that. I helped him solve that problem because I found out your assessor really likes bees. So I hooked up my client with a beekeeper, and now they have bees on the property, and they got his taxes back down. But his taxes were going to go from $1,000 up to 40,000 a year, so or whatever it was going to be, 36,000 or something. So he was happy and he's quieted down, but the thing is we're trying to list and sell property. We don't want to have to be the intermediaries of the tax department. We're like
yeah.
you get threats, we get threats. People freak
Well, when you
out.
have mainland owners, I mean, I don't know what to say. I would have to look at each of those cases. I'm not gonna say all of the assessors are doing everything correctly. I think for the most part, they're trying to follow what they're supposed to. It sounds like this situation ended up okay because they did the bees. So
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
I've got more cases of that, and they're not my clients, but I hear about them, and I go and I verify, and I can tell you that, and I know that that job doesn't pay squat, and you're not going to get the show. It's tough to pay someone $24,000 or whatever it is a year, and put them in a job like that where all they get is grief. That's
true. They get paid a little bit more than 24,000, but yeah, it's hard. Well, is there, I don't mind talking to you maybe off record. I just didn't know if there's anybody who has other questions.
There was one other question.
One
in the
other?
chat,
Okay.
Yes. Is anyone going to review the residential tax status for ag zoned homes on parcels less than 1 acre? This is arbitrary and unfair. Many properties in ag zoned areas on 1+ acre are zoned as being residential and get the tax break, although zero agriculture is happening. I think what they're saying is maybe that it's a like arbitrary mark at 1 acre. The same things are going on the same property.
I see. So properties that are zoned ag that are under 1 acre are taxed at the residential class, unless they're in an active ag use program. They will get the lower ag or the agricultural tax zoning class. But for those others that are under 1 acre, they're at residential. And they want to know if someone can relook at that?
I guess so.
Okay. Yeah, I can put that in. I'm guessing the new hot word everybody wants is in economic impact studies. I can ask for it in I have no funding for it, but I can ask council to do one because they're doing it on everything else, but it does involve ag, and I think they're gonna have to do that. I can tell you why that happened. It did come out of the review group. There were a lot of complaints that, half our island is zoned ag, which is great. I'm on a property that's, I think, 17,000 square feet or so, zoned ag. No ag, and our whole thing is residential. It's advertised when we bought it as a residential property. It's used as residential, there's no ag. I get it though, for different parts of the island, that can mean something else. I still have a paved road with streetlights. I get it for other areas that's under an ag, that's not the case. So I'm more than happy to suggest and put in my supplemental budget to have that re-looked at for the sake of just being transparent. I honestly don't know where they're gonna go with that. For properties over 1 acre, it did seem like the potential for ag use was at least more there, or not considered. When you started looking at MLS records too, it was being advertised more as agriculture and not necessarily just residential. But we have 5,000 square foot lots zoned ag 1A. So sometimes zoning isn't everything, right? You have Palisades, I think that's still zoned unplanned. So your default is ag 5A. We were getting yelled at from people from not making it the residential tax class because they thought they would get a better interest rate. And so it goes, there's two sides to every story, like the last speaker said, and I think they would have to look at it. And I don't know enough about economic impact analysis. I just know it's a thing now that maybe the county needs to do that before they do anything. I'm worried that some agencies will use it to do nothing. But if it's not as significant in cost and we can implement it, I'd be more than happy to try. Anything else?
That's it. Any more questions on Zoom?
Do you like your job?
Not right now. Yeah, no, not right now. Yeah, I have 9 years, 5 months, and 12 days, but I'm not counting. No, well, honestly, most days, if I'm just dealing with programs and taxpayers, I do love the job. Staff is a different issue in a union environment, and my staff, I love most of them, but they understand that as well. It's difficult, and when it's an election year, I especially do not like my job. I think I'll say that. But anyway, thank you for having me here today. I'm sorry this went way long. Way long. And you'll send out those presentations to everybody? Okay, thank you.